You guys loved the first part of this video, but YouTube definitely didn't. So let's see what happens when we actually get to the actual disturbing stuff. Goodnight Punpun is a series following the life of Punpun as he goes through different emotional struggles growing up in an abusive household. In the last video, Punpun is depressed over rejecting his crush Aiko, and then we cut 2 years later as Punpun is about to get into high school, while his uncle is going through his own midlife crisis as well. YouTube, please do not demonetize this video because we're just about to get started with how messed up and emotionally damaging this series can get. The series continues with Punpun checking the results of his high school entrance exam. Punpun has been studying really hard to get in, but he actually doesn't really care about the exams at all. He only has one thing on his mind. He really wants to have sex, though he isn't sure with whom. Punpun goes home to show his mom that he passed his entrance exam. He also then shows Midori, his uncle's girlfriend, and the three of them go out to celebrate. Meanwhile, Yuuichi is at a grocery store staring at a knife and looking just exhausted. A day later, Punpun graduates from middle school, but again, he doesn't feel particularly moved by it. He walks out into the rain where Aiko is seen staring at him. Later, Punpun visits Midori's cafe and then eats chocolate cake, while Midori just yaps about the cafe and the fact that they're moving. She then begins to cry in front of Punpun, but some customers come in, forcing her to basically go back to work. Afterwards, she and Punpun walk home together. Midori vents about her frustrations while Punpun thinks about how bad his eyesight is. Unsure how to comfort her, he simply just says that he's sure Yuuichi will come home soon. Meanwhile, Yuuichi takes a taxi. The driver notices how distressed he looks, and Yuuichi begins to confess that he had an affair. He explains that a woman from his pottery class started seeing him. Her husband then found out, and they got divorced. Yuuichi adds that his sister sold her home and is now going to be lending him money, even though he always looked down on her. Because she's so spontaneous and free, getting sympathy from her only just makes him feel even worse. Back at home, Punpun and Midori are shown playing video games late into the night. Yuuichi continues his story, telling the driver that he once promised his girlfriend that if he ever hurt her, she should just kill him. However, instead, she forgave him, which made him hate himself even more because people are just too kind. The driver relates to him, saying that he's done things far worse and that if it weren't for his wife, he'd be dead already. His only regret is not thanking her properly when she was on her deathbed. Before driving away, he tells Yuuichi that maybe he too has something left unfinished. Yuuichi stares out into the horizon, tears in his eyes. In the end, Yuuichi never came home though. Punpun's house gets packed up and the family officially move. As Punpun's mother leaves for the new house, he and Midori walk into her cafe. On the way, Midori continues to yap to Punpun, but suddenly, she spots someone she thinks is Yuuichi. She rushes towards him only to discover that it's a homeless man named Toshiki, wearing a sign that reads, "I will tell you the future." The homeless man then screams at her, saying that the time is near. This is something important to remember for later, by the way. They eventually reach the cafe, and Punpun forces a smile to try and cheer up Midori, but she begins to cry again, thinking about Yuuichi. She then hugs Punpun tightly and admits that she knows everything about the affair with the pottery student. She had been ready to give him one last chance, but instead, he ran away. She confesses that she was so frustrated, she even thought of ways of torturing him. Holding Punpun even closer, Midori then says that she loved the four of them when they were living together. She then wonders out loud what kind of man Punpun will become, before slipping her hand into his pants. Punpun panics and he pulls away, but Midori asks him not to move. She then proceeds to remove both of their pants, and the two engage in something that I obviously don't have to mention on YouTube. Punpun finishes, thinking of Aiko, and afterward Midori gives him a graduation gift, telling him that she loves him. Punpun just silently leaves, afraid to say anything for fear of losing what little stability that he has left. At his new apartment, Punpun just sinks into depression, while his mother goes out drinking and sleeping with strangers. He fantasizes about leaving and then starting fresh somewhere far away, but then God appears, and instead of comforting him, Punpun finds himself standing on the edge of the balcony, nearly ready to jump. However, at the last second, he collapses backwards into his apartment, horrified at what he almost did. We then cut to Seki, who is thinking about life when Shimizu approaches him. Shimizu is doing well in high school and Seki has dropped out entirely. Seki wants money, and as they walk through town, he spots a poster for a handyman service. He scratches out the number and then replaces it with Shimizu's phone. Soon after, a man approaches and offers them money to clean up his apartment. While they walk, someone calls Shimizu's phone for a job, and Seki abandons him to handle the work alone. Seki then meets up with a woman who wants revenge on her ex-boyfriend. At first, she only wants to ruin his life, but after a while, she tells Seki to just kill him. Seki shockingly agrees. He begins following the man around, looking for the right moment, but soon realizes that he's just an ordinary person. At a train station, Seki reflects that people invented gods because they don't really understand themselves. Maybe that's what it means to be human. But since there's no real meaning, he decides that he should just go through with it. He stands just an arm's length away from pushing the man into the oncoming train. Meanwhile, Shimizu is with the man who hired him. The man feels guilty making Shimizu work alone and explains that the property belongs to an old man who had recently died of loneliness. Shimizu spots a strange figure in the window and then panics, backing out of the job. However, the man doesn't even blame him. Back at the train station, the ex-boyfriend remains alive. Later, Shimizu looks out over the city as the poop god begins to talk to him. Shimizu insists that Seki told him that there's no such thing as God. Suddenly, the homeless man appears behind them, claiming that there is a god inside everyone's heart. To demonstrate, he points out a herd of flying Pegasuses in the sky. Pegasuses? Is that how you say it? I don't know.
Pegasuses.
Introducing himself as Pegasus, though his real name is actually Toshiki, he explains his theory of the universe. Shimizu runs away, but not before Pegasus warns him that he is the chosen one, and that on June 7th, 5 years from now, the Earth will be destroyed. He asks for Shimizu's help gathering members and then ends with the phrase, "good vibrations." Now, why is this character so important? What could he mean by the Earth will get destroyed? Well, I wish I could tell you because it gets very confusing from here on out, but also pretty intense. Later, Seki returns with the woman's money, telling her that he didn't go through with the murder. Relieved, she gives him some money for dinner anyways, but when he tries to offer advice, she throws water in his face, calling him a child who knows nothing. Seki then returns to the park where Shimizu finds him again. The two wander the city together, share ramen, and then agree to remain friends no matter what, with Shimizu repeating Pegasus' phrase, "good vibrations." Nearby, Punpun is at karaoke with some new friends. It's clear that he feels very out of place. He no longer knows who he is and is still desperately wanting to have sex. Suddenly, a girl named Kayane approaches him, asking if he's okay, offering to leave with him. They walk around the city together, and then later, Punpun asks if she'll hang out with him next week, and she agrees. Back at home, Punpun's mom tells him that his grandfather passed away. At school, Kayane invites Punpun to an art exhibit her sister is a part of. He says yes, but then after school, Punpun and his mother head out to his grandfather's house, where Midori and Yuuichi are also waiting. Yuuichi refuses to see them, leaving Punpun alone with Midori. It's the first time that they've seen each other since the incident, and Punpun just can't shake the memory out of his head. Midori then reveals shocking news. She and Yuuichi are now married. She explains that after the cafe incident, Yuuichi came back and then started seeing a therapist. She's happy now, and she gives Punpun a small doll keychain. Furious and imagining throwing her down a ditch, Punpun only manages to mutter, "Congratulations." As they leave, Punpun can see Yuuichi behind a window and then him closing the curtains, which could mean that Yuuichi knows about Midori's affair with Punpun, which is very awkward. At the train station, Punpun's mother yells at him to just watch his attitude, accusing him of playing the victim. She then collapses on the floor, telling him not to come home because she has a friend coming over. Punpun then begins to believe that adults are just selfish, and even though he tries to talk to himself into a better mood, it doesn't work. He throws Midori's keychain onto the ground. The volume ends with Pegasus lying on the ground, issuing a very stern warning. He's coming. We've seen Punpun nearly get into a breaking point multiple times throughout this series already, but with this warning from Pegasus, it feels like it's hinting at something more sinister. It doesn't seem like a coincidence that just when Punpun begins to show some rage that Pegasus announces that he's coming. It could just mean that Punpun might turn into a violent maniac, or maybe someone else is coming, but what does this have to do with the world ending in 5 years? Well, let's just go ahead and keep going. Punpun is seen playing in an arcade since he can't go back home. He wonders how many adults could comfort a boy who was hoping a meteor or a small planet would just crash into the Earth. Also remember the Zito, it will be on the final exam. Punpun tries to think positively, focusing on his upcoming date with Kayane. However, his thoughts quickly spiral into obsession. He begins to overthink about the date just going horribly wrong, crashing out under the weight of all of his anxiety, all while his mom and her company are hanging out in the new apartment. Quote unquote, hanging out. Later that night, Punpun wanders through the streets, still consumed with the thoughts of Kayane. Suddenly, he pulls down his pants and exposes himself, muttering, "Someone please come and find me. I'm here." Meanwhile, after her night with the company, Punpun's mom reflects on the recent death of her father. The man then embraces her, and then she asks him to marry her. He declines, reminding her that his wife wouldn't really like that. Punpun's mom then walks into the kitchen and then returns holding a knife, her expression hazy and very distant, very similar to Yuuichi's breakdown from the previous volume. She insists that she's not going to stab him, but instead, herself, so she can start a new life, while cursing him out in the process. Suddenly, she then collapses, begging the man to call an ambulance. At the hospital, doctors discover a hole in her lung, and that she requires surgery. The next day, Punpun visits her, and she tells him that he doesn't need to come anymore, because Midori will take care of her now. Punpun then gets angry and then storms off. Left alone, her mother begins to trip on her medication. She hallucinates seeing different points of her life, her old home, Punpun's father, and even Midori caring for her at the hospital. In reality though, she just collapsed on the ground, and a young boy helps her up. The boy introduces himself as Shantoro. He's 16 years old, just like Punpun. And he talks to Punpun's mom about her injuries, then shares his own story on how he broke his leg in a bike accident. Punpun's mom then finds herself developing a crush on Shantoro, though she tries to suppress it. We flash back to Punpun's parents at the kitchen of their old home. His mother tells his father that she's leaving him and that she's taking Punpun. His father protests, saying that she isn't fit to even take care of him. However, she storms into the kitchen and then grabs a knife, and screams that she'll kill Punpun and then she'll kill herself. She waves the knife wildly, shrieking until Punpun's father just grabs a microwave and then smashes it over her head. Just then, a younger Punpun walks in. We finally see the full truth of what happened in the very first chapter. Back in the present, Shantoro continues talking to Punpun's mom. Though he doesn't really need to stay at the hospital, he reveals that his girlfriend was also in the bike accident, where her injuries were far worse. She suffered major facial damage, and Shantoro admits that he hasn't even been able to face her. It was his fault after all. She hadn't wanted to get on the bike because it was too dangerous, but Shantoro wanted to show off, speeding recklessly, and then it caused their crash. Punpun's mom then gets serious, telling him that he needs to apologize. Shantoro insists that he can't. No apology could ever make up for what he did. She then tells him that he's being selfish. Shantoro admits that he's just terrified that his girlfriend will hate him now. But Punpun's mom tells him not to waste time about worrying about what ifs. She says that she once wanted her ex-husband to just tell her stuff like, "I'm sorry" or "I love you." And the truth is that she still loves him, but her pride destroyed the possibility of reconciling. Because of who she is, she believes that she will always be alone. The next day, Punpun's mom had a nightmare about her upcoming surgery. She then wakes up to see Shantoro's girlfriend, who she angrily resents, even though they're both women who are hurt. But Shantoro's girlfriend has someone to love and be loved by, while she has no one. Yet, she still offers the girl encouraging words. The girl in turn gives her kind words about her surgery. And though Punpun's mom feels her own words are just meaningless, she admits that the girl's encouragement is very nice to hear. We cut back to Punpun, who is preparing for his date with Kayane. He dresses carefully, and then he even brings condoms, just in case. They meet up, but since they're very early for Kayane's sister's art show, she suggests killing some time, which excites Punpun. At the hospital, Punpun's mom heads into surgery with a new mindset. Midori tells her that Punpun isn't there, but before she goes under, she tells the surgeon that she wants to confess her feelings to Shantoro, and then promises to use the second chance to be a better mother. Punpun and Kayane continue their date. Punpun tries his hardest to try to make it as perfect as possible, but he struggles to actually connect with her. This leaves him feeling very irritated, guilty, and even unworthy. It was very clear that his confidence was falling apart. At the art show, they meet Kayane's sister, Miyuki, and her friend, Nanjo. who both have pieces on display. Miyuki's painting depicts the importance of family, which Kayane just loves, but Punpun is just left speechless, and it's clear that all of his confidence has drained away. His thoughts then drift to Aiko and whether that he'll actually see her again. Now feeling completely hopeless and just wanting to go home, he then comes across Nanjo's painting, a massive, breathtaking starry night. Punpun immediately recognizes it as the same starry night that he saw at the factory with his friends years ago. Nanjo approaches and then tells him it's based on a teenage memory. She asks Punpun to write down his thoughts about it for her, but Punpun doesn't know what to say. Instead, he writes a story called The Milky Way, about a normal boy in another universe who becomes depressed and falls in love with a transfer student. After finishing, Punpun just felt like crying. Later, he and Kayane leave the art show, and as it begins to rain, Punpun starts thinking about her sexually and then tries to make a move. However, Kayane says that she needs to go home, but feeling very desperate, Punpun grabs her hand, asking to stay together a little longer. She agrees, but it's very awkward as they just sit there in silence. Kayane eventually breaks it, suggesting that they should go home, reminding him that his mother is probably worried. However, Punpun replies that his mother is in surgery, so it doesn't really matter. Kayane then asks if he's even worried about her, which confuses Punpun since his presence wouldn't really change the outcome of the surgery. The more Kayane challenges him, the more frustrated that he becomes. Finally, Kayane snaps, asking what he really wants from her. Punpun then says that he just wants to date her, but Kayane responds that his earlier kindness wasn't actually about wanting her, it was about wanting to be liked. She refuses him, saying that Punpun loves himself too much. Obviously, from our perspective, that couldn't be further from the truth, but from Kayane's point of view, it does kinda make sense. God then appears, urging Punpun to violate Kayane. Punpun then lunges at her, grabbing her face and trying to kiss her, but Kayane slaps him, and she says that she regrets ever even going on a date with him, calling Punpun a sad person. Afterward, Punpun goes to a playground. He's obsessively replaying their argument in their head, worrying about how it will ruin his image, basically kind of proving Kayane's point. In the rain, he then strips naked and begins jerking it, while God just watches him with disappointment. Back at the hospital, Punpun's mom survives the surgery, and with a new haircut, she goes to try to visit Shantoro's girlfriend, but she learns that she's already been picked up by Shantoro. She then searches for them until she finally finds them, and sees them making up. But for some reason, the sight just crushes her. She returns to the hospital to find a letter from Shantoro. In it, he apologizes for being very rude the other day, explaining that he's going to confess his feelings to his girlfriend and then says it's thanks to her. He admits that he's just a kid, but knowing that adults are tormented too made him feel a little better. He says he admires her for being so open about her vulnerabilities. Punpun's mom then begins to break down crying, realizing that she is all alone again. Later, she goes home and she sees Punpun, now sporting a new haircut of his own. Though she tries to be very kind to him, she then lashes out. The next day, Punpun runs into Kayane at school. Surprisingly, she doesn't seem very upset. Instead, she acts like nothing happened. They chat casually before she leaves, leaving Punpun just standing there, completely devoid of confidence. Meanwhile, his mother writes a letter to a certain somebody. At the hospital, her doctor tells her that she's nearly ready to be discharged, but has some concerns that she may have cancer, and then urges her to get a scan. She leaves and then mails the letter to Punpun's father. At school, Punpun goes to the rooftop to reflect on Kayane. He thinks that he should be giving life more credit, even feeling like apologizing to the entire world. But he closes his eyes and then he tells himself that he can never fall in love again. We then flash back to the mother's life, her school days, her wild party years, and even the moment that she gave birth to Punpun. But then we cut to 2 years later, and Punpun's mother lies on her deathbed after a battle with cancer. Clutching on to Punpun, she then asks if he still hates her. She admits that she did many terrible things to him, that she doesn't love him in the traditional sense, or at least that's the nature of their twisted relationship. Still though, she apologizes and says that she loves him very much. She then passes away, and at her funeral, Punpun, Yuuichi, and Midori are present. The volume ends with Punpun standing on the balcony of their apartment, admitting to himself that he never loved his mother, even at the very end, and it was at that moment when Punpun's father arrives at the apartment. Punpun is on the balcony when Midori walks in and then gives him a letter written by his mom. The letter reveals that Punpun's mom is very sorry for lying to him, but she was the one pretending to be Punpun's father when writing the letters. Soon after, Punpun's dad enters the apartment and then tries to talk to him, but the interaction is just painfully awkward, and Punpun clearly doesn't enjoy it. His father, who has been neglecting him for years, hasn't even changed at all. Despite that, he asks Punpun if he'd like to move in with him in Fukushima. Punpun, thinking that his father is just full of it, declines and says that he'll just live on his own. His father then awkwardly says goodbye, leaving the apartment with tears in his eyes. Afterward, Punpun reflects on his choices until Yuuichi knocks on his door. They go out for a walk, and Yuuichi talks about Punpun's frustration. He tells Punpun that he understands him, but then warns him not to think too harshly about his father. Yuuichi then shares something personal. The first time that he slept with Midori, he felt like the old version of himself died, and when they decided to get married, they promised to share everything with each other. He confirms that he knows what happened between him and Midori, but instead of being angry, he says that he loves Punpun regardless. He asks Punpun to think about whether, when he dies, his life will really have been worth living. The next chapter begins with Punpun's first day living alone. Although he feels very lonely, he manages pretty well. Meanwhile, we cut to a random woman walking to the rooftop of a building, where Pegasus and a group of followers have gathered. They're called the Pegasus Ensemble. After performing a song and dance, Pegasus announced that they need 2 more members within 2 years before it happens. We cut back to Punpun as he's very miserable at his part-time job. After another dull day, he rides the train home, but just as the doors close, he spots Aiko standing right in front of him. Panics, he jumps off at the next stop and then runs through multiple train stations trying to find her, but he never does. Even so, he's kinda happy just knowing that she survived and then grew up. Later, he sees a flyer advertising a studio apartment for only $200 and then begins reflecting on how Aiko is now a proper adult, and while he hasn't accomplished anything in years, he decides to rent the studio. He walks in to see that the landlord is the same old man who once hired Seki and Shimizu to clean up his apartment. The following day, Punpun visits Midori at her cafe to tell her about his new place, and then he gives her his mom's savings account. Midori worries that he's just being very impulsive, but he insists that he's just fine. After signing the contract, Punpun then feels a little bit more grown up, though he's kinda saddened by the thought that this apartment was originally supposed to be for him and Aiko. His nights are just spent listening to the neighbors argue and then make up. Meanwhile, Punpun's high school friend and coworker is asleep in his room when Pegasus suddenly opens a dimensional door and tries to recruit him. However, he's too sleepy to comprehend, and the coworker just doesn't respond. So, Pegasus just leaves. Later, while eating with Punpun, the coworker recounts on the strange experience, thinking it might have just been a message from God. Punpun, however, is still brooding over not finding Aiko. Punpun starts ignoring Midori entirely, while Pegasus continues his antics, at one point even interacting with police officers, and then just Naruto running out of the situation. A lot of the panel time has been devoted to Punpun's coworker, which often just yaps about his life and his worries about the future and even just sumo wrestling. A lot of this just feels like filler. Like, this character isn't as interesting compared to like the main story of Punpun, so why have so much panel time for him? But as we see, Punpun's depression just deepens. He skips work, goes home, and then ignores a card and a gift from Midori. Usually in a time like this, he would mutter the strange prayer, dear God, Tinkle Hoy." And yeah, I know I said it wrong the last time. I saw your guys' comments. But Punpun thinks the words are ridiculous and blames himself for everything. Finally, he breaks down, running into the rain, screaming, and just looking utterly destroyed. The next morning, the landlord, Shishido, visits Punpun, who is now depicted as a triangle. They talk casually in his office, and Punpun just seems somewhat okay. According to the mangaka, Punpun is drawn as a triangle here because he wanted Punpun to be a simple shape, which doesn't answer the question, but many fans interpret that the triangle is a reflection of Punpun's emotional state, loneliness, instability, and just the desire to shutting himself off from other people. Shishido even confirms this, saying comments about Punpun's eyes looking as though he's been betrayed before and not wanting to open up to others. This resonates with Punpun as he begins to think about the people who have troubled him in the past: Midori, Kayane, his mother, and of course, Aiko. Their conversation is interrupted when Shishido's daughter storms in and then kicks them out. They head to a bar together where they're soon joined by a young woman soaked from the rain. She turns out to be related to Shishido and is also revealed to be Nanjo, the same girl from the art exhibit 3 years ago. Nanjo recognizes Punpun and then mentions that Kaine got a boyfriend in college but didn't lose her virginity. She blatantly says that their breakup was Punpun's fault, suggesting that he was too much of a virgin, and adds that Kaine was really bummed out about their date because she was really into him, so how badly must he have messed up? This of course frustrates Punpun, who tries to leave, but Nanjo quickly apologizes, saying that she just has a sharp tongue. She tells him that she appreciated what he wrote in her book back then. Though she thought it was just a random rant, she found it to be a compelling story and then asked if he ever considered writing it into something proper. After saying that, Punpun is then transformed back into a bird. He then gets drunk and then begins ranting about his life to Nanjo, though she doesn't really understand what he's saying. The volume then ends with the next morning, Punpun hung over and then back in his triangle form. He steps into the living room and is shocked to see Nanjo sleeping on the floor, leaving him in a panic. And that is where we're going to end this part of Goodnight Punpun. While I still really enjoy this series and I'm now learning more about like the symbolisms and the choices that the people make actually mean something, I can't just ignore the constant filler and repetitive monologues from Punpun. Like, we get it, Punpun is depressed, and we don't need every chapter to be like, Punpun hates the summer but he also hates the winter, so he pretty much just hates himself. The moments mentioned in this video do have an importance, so that's why I kept it in the video, but sometimes there are just these really long monologues of Punpun just repeating itself, or just a side character saying something unimportant, or just saying something really boring. For example, the coworker, and I really hate to admit this, but also the storylines with Seki and Shimizu. It's not really as interesting as when they were hanging out with Punpun, but I do think that the real stinker in this series so far is Pegasus. He really does nothing to impact the story so far, but I do hope that later down the line he does have a huge impact on Punpun's life. And I've already read the story, so I know the answer to that, and if you want to know the answer too, then let's just get this video to 2K likes for part 3. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one.